Hello and welcome to Stephanie's tutorial video on how to perform spread plating. Now, when we are doing spread plating, there are a few things that we're going to keep in mind. In this video, we are going to be talking about spread plating technique. Now, before we do any type of plating, or anything where we are using a Bunsen burner, we first want to make sure that we have any loose articles of clothing that are fully fastened so my sleeves aren't going to be catching into the way of anything. Additionally, I want to make sure that my hair is going to be pulled back, so then that way, in case I lean over in front of the Bunsen burner, I'm not going to accidentally ignite myself on fire. Once that is taken care of, we want to make sure that we organize our bench space so that we have everything that we need. For today, for spread plating, we are going to need our Bunsen burner and our flint striker. We are going to need a little tub of ethanol, such as this, and a hockey stick or a spreader. We are also likely going to need a pipetter and some tips. And then finally, our plate and our bacterial sample. And so before I do anything else, I do want to always make sure that my plate is properly labeled around the edges of the plate. So then that way, when I go to put this in the incubator and I take a look in a couple of days, I will be able to know what was growing on this plate. As long as that is all taken care of, what we can do is we can go ahead and light our Bunsen burner. So I'm going to turn the gas line all the way on, such as this, and I'm going to hold the flint striker over the flame, over where the gas is going to be coming out as such. And you can probably see, maybe even from the video, that the flame is quite high right now, and I don't need it to be quite that high. So I'm going to turn down the gas line just a teensy bit. And then the other thing I'm going to do is on this Bunsen burner, you'll notice that there is a little bit of a gauge on the bottom of this, and there is like a window that can open up. And so when we are going to be doing our streak plating, and I'll show that in another video, this blue cone, this inner blue cone that you see here, is going to be important because that's where the flame is going to be the hottest. Now for something like spread plating, it's a little bit less important for us to have that inner blue cone, and also it was a little bit loud, so I am going to just turn it back to this other way. But you can appreciate my Bunsen burner is lit, so that means that we are all set. What we want to make sure of is that the gas line is not on when the flame is not coming out of it. That means that gas is going to be into the room, and ultimately that could lead to problems, and we want to avoid problems if we can. So for spread plating, the first thing I'm going to need to do is take my plate, and normally we keep our plates auger side up, so then that way any condensation that might be forming on this lid will stay on the lid and not disrupt any of the plate. What I will do is I'm going to flip this plate over, but making sure to keep the lid on. We want to make sure not to get any type of contamination from the air or anywhere else when we're not actively utilizing the auger. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pipette tip. And typically with spread plating, what we want to do is add 100 microliters of whatever bacterial culture it is that we're going to be utilizing, and add that directly onto the plate. And so you can see here that I have about 100 microliters of liquid that I have pre-diluted before this video. And I'm going to pull up that liquid, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to disperse it directly onto the plate. It doesn't have to be in any particular order or any which way, as long as it makes it onto the plate. What you will notice is that I lifted up the lid when it was time to pipette, and then I returned the lid when I was done. I'm all done with this tip, so I got rid of that. And now comes this actual spreading. So for this technique, we are going to be using our ethanol and our hockey stick. In order to make sure that we aren't contaminating our plates, we are going to need to sterilize this hockey stick, because right now it's just been open in the air, very possibly could have some bacteria on it. So I opened up the ethanol, and for the sake of this video, I'm keeping it a little bit closer to the flame than I typically would like to, just to make sure it's in the shot. But you'll notice that I'm taking my spreader and I am sterilizing it just like that. And I'm kind of tapping off any excess liquid and replacing the lid there. But you'll notice that there is still a little bit of ethanol on this spreader. Now at this point, my spreader is actually sterile. That's what this ethanol is here for. But if you can imagine, there's a little bit of ethanol left on this spreader. If I were to take this spreader and just go right and spread the bacteria around on the plate, I potentially could be transferring the ethanol onto this plate, which would also ultimately kill the bacteria. We want to avoid that. So what I am going to do, and for the sake of the fact I've been talking for a little while, I'm going to dip it again just for good measure. What I'm going to do is pass my hockey stick through the Bunsen burner flame, just like that. And you might notice that it actually ignited the ethanol that was left over on my hockey stick. Now I didn't hold my hockey stick in the flame so that it was going to heat up this metal, but I was able to catch it on fire just long enough to burn up that excess ethanol. Now I'm gonna let it cool for like a couple of seconds, and once it is cool enough, I'm always gonna just touch it to the auger on the other side just to make sure that there's no sizzle or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this spreader, such as this, and literally spread around the bacterial liquid, almost as though I was trying to coat a pan with a stick of melted butter. We want to make sure that we are completely covering the entire plate, and we're going to be swirling it around just like this, and just like that. That looks like a spread plate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my spreader and I'm going to re-sterilize it. So I'm going to dip it in this ethanol, try not to spill any like I just did, and we're going to close it right back off. If you would like, you can pass this through the flame once more, just to make sure that all that ethanol comes off. But what you should not do is put this immediately back into the ethanol. If this is on fire and we dip it in something that's flammable, that's going to cause a huge fire, and that's something that I would like to avoid, and I'm sure you would as well. But that is the basics of spread plating. So once I am done, I'm just going to leave my hockey stick and ethanol container just like this, and eventually I will flip my plate back over just to make sure that that condensation doesn't end up getting on the auger. And once I'm done, can go ahead and turn off my Bunsen burner. And that's spread plating.